All right, who knows the artist who sang Ring of Fire, Folsom Blues, Folsom Prison Blues? Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash was born in Arkansas, a faithful family, but poor, very poor, lost his brother, an accident, sawmill, I think it was, accident. And when he just loved music, his whole life he loved music, and decided, like so many people do, he's going to go to Nashville and become a star. And he went to Nashville and he sold furniture. And he went to Sam Phillips at Sun Records, and he was like, hey, he sang us some gospel songs, and Sam's like, man, that's boring. He's like, man, go home and sin a little bit, so you've got something to sing about. Come back when you've lived life a little harder, and then you'll have something to sing about. And so Johnny left, and he came back with some rockabilly songs, and then he released Folsom Blues, Folsom Prison Blues, and that just like skyrocketed his career. And then everybody knew he was touring, he was hanging out with Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis, and like so many rock stars, he fell into the rock star lifestyle of sex, drugs, and alcohol and all that stuff. Many affairs, lots of times he was very high when he was performing. He became very agitated, very moody. He's the only person in the history of California where the state has sued him as person because he nearly burned down a natural forest. He was arrested multiple times, I think probably because he was so famous. It's probably the only reason that kept him out of prison himself. He's had a pretty tumultuous life. And he definitely did his sinning, as Sam Phillips recommended that he do. So I've got a little video to kind of give you a history, a snapshot of his life and some of his darkest days. As I watch that video, I think to myself, he crawled into this cave to die, and I think, what else crawls away to die as a dog? You know, like a dog that's been beaten down, and he was like, I'm just gonna go where no one can find me, no one has to be the one who finds me. Think about how desperate and lonely and worthless you must feel to crawl into a cave to die. And God met him there. Sometimes in our lives, we are so down, so dark, so desperate, so ready to be done with all of it, that all we want to do is crawl into a dark cave and die. But God has other plans for us. God has good plans for us. In fact, it says in Jeremiah, one of my favorite verses, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. And Johnny grew up in the church. He probably heard this verse 100 times, but when you are so deep and dark like that, when you're so hopeless, it's hard to really hold on to that. But God met him there. God didn't let him die in that cave, and his story is now a testimony to us of how God can meet us in literally our darkest moment. God can meet us at that place where we're at such desperation we think there's no possible way this can work out. There's no possible way forward. I don't want to live. I don't have a desire to keep going on. And God can show up. And I love that it says this complete sense of peace came over him. I imagine he surrendered. He probably said, all right, God, that's it. I'm done. And God said, no, you're not. Because I have plans for you. Good plans, Johnny. I have good plans. I'm going to get you out of this cave. He got out of that cave with no flashlight. How did he find his way out of that cave without a flashlight? He'd been crawling for hours. There's no way he could remember all the twists and turns he took. God led him out of that cave. God is a God who meets us where we are, even when everything in our life has gone to crap. There's another story in the Bible. There's a time Jesus runs into a guy who's kind of like Johnny. He's a mess. He's a guy named Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus, I don't know why the Bible felt the need to mention the fact that he was short, but Zacchaeus was a short guy, and he was a tax collector. And tax collectors were like the scum of the earth. They were those people, they were known to be cheats and frauds and like these terrible people who lied, and they were known to be crooks. And this guy, and Zacchaeus had heard about Jesus. He's like, I'm gonna get a look at this guy. He's like, I'm too short to see him, so I'm gonna climb up in this tree. And here's the story. It says, Jesus was in Jericho passing through. A man there by the name of Zacchaeus was the chief tax collector. So he was the head honcho of the tax collectors. And he was very wealthy. He wanted to see Jesus, but he was short and he couldn't see over the crowd. So he ran ahead, climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, and since Jesus was coming that way. Jesus reached that spot. He looked up and said, Zacchaeus, come on down here. I'm going to stay at your house today. And so he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. I mean, seriously, think about this. Think about the most reprobate person you can think of. The person who you would think has sinned the most. The worst possible person. Jesus is walking down the street. He's like, hey, what's up, dude? Come on down. I'm going to come over to your house and have lunch. And so all the other people around were like, what the? He's like, he's going to go be a guest of that sinner? He's going to go be a guest of that liar and that cheat? He's going to go be a guest of that jerk, Zacchaeus? That guy with Napoleon syndrome, that short guy who lords it over everybody, that guy who didn't give me a break when my taxes were behind, that guy that made it so my family had to starve because we didn't have money to pay our taxes. You're going to go be with that guy? But Zacchaeus is like, let's go. He's like, Lord, come on. He says, you know what, God? The fact that you even saw me, that you would speak to me, that you would come have dinner at my house, I'm going to give up half of my possessions. Remember, it said he was wealthy. I'm going to give away half of all that I have, and if I've cheated anybody, I'm going to give them 4 times the amount that I've cheated them. And Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house. Because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man, that's Jesus, came to seek and to save the lost. Jesus came to save people like Zacchaeus. Jesus came to save people like Johnny. Jesus didn't come for the people who had it all together. Jesus came for the people who were a hot mess. Jesus came for the outcasts. Jesus came for the sinners, the people who you see on the street and you're like, ew. That's who Jesus came for. And he said to him, now you're a son of Abraham. And what that means, he's saying, not only did I enjoy your delicious lunch, thank you, Zacchaeus, for a nice, scrumptious meal, but now you get to be a part of my family. You get to be part of the family of Abraham. And the family of Abraham are people who God has promised to be with, to never leave, to bless, to protect, to shower with provision. So here's this guy who's lied and cheated and stolen from people, who has made people go hungry, who has destroyed people's lives, and now Jesus is like, I'm going to adopt you into my family. And so for those people who can relate to Johnny and Zacchaeus, those people whose lives are a total wreck, who have done all the things that society considers bad, those people that everyone's like, ew, that's great news. That means there's hope for those people. There was hope for Johnny. Johnny crawled out of that cave and shared his story. He got clean. He toured. I was looking up, like, what are some good Johnny Cash gospel songs? They were like the top 50, which means there's more than 50. He released a ton of Christian music. So all these people who love Johnny Cash, drunk Johnny Cash, Folsom Prison Blues Johnny Cash, all those people who could relate to that guy are now hearing gospel music, are now hearing the story of a guy who crawled into a cave and to die, and he got better, who wrecked his first marriage, cheating and lying to her, and he ended up, that ship had sailed, but then he got with June, and that marriage was beautiful. God adopted Johnny into his family and said, you're mine, and I have plans for you, and they're awesome. And he lived a fairly long life after that, making music and singing and sharing his story with people. That's the kind of God we serve, who comes to a person like Johnny Cash We sit on the opposite. We sit on the resurrected side of Johnny Cash. We're like, Johnny Cash is a great guy. But man, if you'd known Johnny Cash before the cave, you'd be like, that guy is a mess. And that's who Jesus runs after. Now, there are some others of us in the story who could relate to the other people in the story. If you've watched, there's a movie, Joaquin, what's that guy's name? Phillips? Joaquin? What is it? Phoenix? Joaquin Phoenix plays Johnny in his movie, and it's a great movie. And there's a scene from this movie that really stood out to me. June Carter is who became Johnny's wife, kind of on the sober side. And she was divorced as well. She was a very famous singer as well, and she was divorced. And she's in this grocery store. And she runs into this little girl, and the little girl's like, hi, and June's like, hi. You know how you do when you see a little kid, you're like, hi. And the little girl's like, hi. And then the mom sees June, and the mom goes, don't talk to her. She is a divorced woman. And because back then, to be a divorced woman was like, you were bad. You're a bad person. I think there's a lot of people who call themselves Christians, and that woman called herself a Christian woman. There are a lot of us who see people in a position like Johnny, and we grab our kids and we say, don't talk to them. Jesus sees that person and says, let's have lunch. You know, tonight, there's going to be a dinner with a lot of people who society has said, don't talk to them. They've done drugs and alcohol. But we as Christians say, let's have dinner. That's who we're called to be. We're called to be people who go out and look for people like Johnny. There's at least one person in your circle, in your family, where you work, in your neighborhood, who your natural tendency as a good Christian is to grab your kid and walk away from them. Don't talk to them. But Jesus says, no. Let's have lunch. So think about that. Who in your sphere is in a Johnny Cash position right now? Who in your sphere is a Zacchaeus right now? Who in your sphere do you need to say, let's have lunch? That annoying guy at work? The one who always brings fish for lunch and talks too much? You know, we've got one of those ladies, every time she talks, you're like, oh my gosh. Okay, that nobody wants to have lunch with. Or that person in your family who's messed up so many times that the family has pushed them out, and now the family doesn't want anything to do with them. Or what about that neighbor whose dog barks all the freaking time? Who everyone in the neighborhood hates, and everyone on Facebook is like, oh, that guy who lives on whatever street. Or the person who lives on your street who's a recovering alcoholic or drug addict. Who's the person who our natural tendency is to grab our kids and pull them away, but instead we need to be saying, let's have lunch. And so I challenge you this week, I dare you to write down the name of at least one person who is left out in your sphere. One person who's been pushed aside and called an outcast, who's been called a sinner, a reprobate, who's not worthy to be talked to. And plan one act of kindness for them. Invite them to lunch. Invite them to coffee. Take dinner over if they're a neighbor. Cook up a lasagna. Take it over and drop it off. Whatever. Ask God to help you see people the way God sees them. Because God sees everybody as loved and valued. There is no one who is so far gone that God can't redeem them. If God can redeem Johnny Cash where he was, he can redeem everybody. Come on. You could read the story of Zacchaeus. It's in Luke 19. And to engage, I want you to invite someone who feels like they don't belong to lunch, to coffee, to church. Who's that person that everyone in the neighborhood sees him and is like, psst, psst, psst. Walk up to that person and be like, hey, let's get coffee. Let's hang out. I want to hear your story. Because that's who we're called to be. We are called to be people who invite, who don't talk behind their backs. Who invite, who don't condemn. And all God's children said, Amen.